Boom! What's up? Welcome to the Sunday Sermon with Mike, your mentor. Hope you guys had a fabulous weekend. Now we got to go back to work, back to the grind, but that's okay. Welcome. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Show me a little bit of love. If you wouldn't mind commenting below. Hashtag live if you're watching live. Hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. And if you're new to this page, hey, thanks for checking this out. So I'm passionate about helping men answer the higher calling that they have on their lives as husbands, as fathers, as friends, and as leaders in our community, because it's my belief that the world is the way it is because men have run away from this responsibility that we've been given for so long, and for several different reasons that I've covered in previous videos that I won't rehash here. But my hope is that I can share wisdom with you, right? Wisdom regarding manhood, and we can return manhood to a place of honor. And that word honor is extremely important because we've lost our way. We have no idea what honor means in society today. I can't speak for other countries, but definitely in American society, honor is a thing of the past, and that's a shame, because if we had honor, we wouldn't have the things going on that we have going on right now with manhood and masculinity. We wouldn't have the Harvey Weinsteins. We wouldn't have all the abuse of power by men, any of those things, that we see on the news and we see on our TVs and outside in our local communities. So my whole purpose in this page and sharing my story and my quest to find out what manhood really means, and to be vulnerable and authentic, and then the purpose behind the Sunday sermon is to share wisdom with you. And my hope would be that you're diligently seeking wisdom, that you're open to wisdom. And I want to start off by sharing something with you guys, and this comes from the wisest man ever to live on the history of the world. And not only, ironically, was he the wisest man ever to live, but he was arguably the richest man ever to live. Richer than Bill Gates, richer than Warren Buffett. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those two things went hand in hand. But he said, "How joyful is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding, because her profit is better than the profit of silver, and her yield than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire compares with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left are riches and honor." Honor, there's that word. Interesting. "Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peaceful. She is a tree of life for those who embrace her, and whoever clutches her tightly will be joyful. By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations, and by understanding he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge the depths broke open, and the clouds dribbled dew." So the Sunday sermon, the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about eagles. God teaches us that we're like eagles, which is extremely interesting. He doesn't say that we're like crows or pigeons or magpies or vultures. He specifically compares us to the most majestic bird out there. Why is that? As a little kid, my grandpa and my mom, they used to take turns, and I don't know who it was, if it was my mom or my grandpa, started subscribing to, might have been something with National Geographic, but they used to send us these cards, and on these cards would be an animal, and it would have all the descriptions, a map where you could find it and see where it lived, characteristics. And I used to sit on their laps and, like flashcards, memorize these things and know all the animals, know all their characteristics, where they lived, and all of that. and it was an intriguing practice, right? And I got to a point where I didn't need the cards anymore. My grandpa or my mom could just say the name of an animal, and I could tell you everything you needed to know about it. I no longer possess that skill, but nevertheless, some of the lessons that I learned from these animals still stay with me today. And we've been taking a look at eagles over the last couple of weeks and what it can teach us about leadership and about what it can teach us about ourselves. So my hope for you is always that I'm coming to you as a big brother, right? Where I'm going to speak truth to you, and it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with that truth, and what part of this is going to speak to you, is going to prick you or to touch on something inside, and that you would take the time to think about that and to meditate on that. And if you're a person of faith like myself, that you would ask God, what is that about? Like, why are you highlighting this to me? So without further ado, let's jump in, share my screen, and show you guys what we got today. And just a shout out, this is not my own content. This was part of a class that I took, and this was taught by Dr. John Burns, who at the time was the pastor at Victory Christian Center. But nonetheless, if you're not a person of faith, like I said, there's a lot of wisdom to be found in this stuff. So let's jump in and rock. All right, Sunday sermon, week 42. Holy cow, there's only 10 more weeks left in this year, and it's a new decade. That is crazy. Eagle-like leadership, part 3. This might be part 4. Don't know if I changed that, but that's all right. So, living like an eagle. Eagles overcome the enemies in their lives. As people, right, it's obvious we're going to have enemies. We're going to have struggles. We're going to have things that we need to overcome. Someone today at the gym when I was playing basketball, they asked me, they're like, man, you got a book in your hand every time I see you here. And they're like, why is that? They're like, do you read every day? And I was telling them that I used to try to read 10 pages every day, and I got away from that. But I'm a big believer in being a lifetime learner. And he was like, well, what's the story behind that? Why? Like, where'd that come from? And I was just telling him, hey, I didn't grow up with a father in my life, and I had a choice. I could either play the victim card and make excuses, or I could make the choice to do something with my life and try to become somebody. And one of the things I had access to, right, that a lot of people have access to, is books. And I would get these books and read these stories about people who had overcome even harder stuff than I did, to make something of themselves, and it was inspiring to me, and I used those people as role models, and started to believe that if they could do that, right, then I could do that. So it took away all my excuses, and that's important, and it's important for us to not buy into the excuses, right, but to look for the solutions in the choices that we have in every situation. So one of the big things that eagles overcome, ironically, is the ground. And eagles were created to soar in the air. If you've ever seen an eagle fly in person, or even on a video, it's incredible, right? There's a reason that they're the national bird here, and just everything that they symbolize and represent, and why societies and governments and people have used their image for so long. But when an eagle meets the ground, they have to deal with it. If you watch an eagle, right, they'll soar, but they will swoop super close to the ground at times, right? Because they got to scoop up their prey. They got to catch their food. And that's actually the most dangerous part of a flight is once they start coming closer to the ground. And we'll see how that plays into this here shortly. But a baby eagle grows to its full size in 6 to 12 weeks. That's crazy, right? And basically, what is that? A week or a month and a half to 3 months, they're full grown. It's insane. An eaglet tries out its wings by floating over its nest for weeks before it tries to fly outside. See, to me that says, there's things that we need to practice, right? There's things in our lives, there's new skills we're trying to learn. There is higher levels that we're trying to get to in our relationships, whether it be with our wife or our kids or the people in our community. There's things that we have to grow into, and a lot of times, especially today with the way culture is, and we have information at our fingertips that we can access instantly. We can order rides instantly. We can turn on the TV and order movies instantly. All this immediate gratification. There's not a lot of patience for growing into things. There's not a lot of sacrifice, immediate sacrifice towards long-term gain. And I think it's funny that here we have an eaglet, unlike a lot of other birds. If you know anything about other birds, when they're ready to fly, they will crawl up on the perch of the nest, and then they will jump off and then spread their wings, and it's like sink or swim or fly or smash at that point. But an eagle doesn't do that, right? An eagle practices by floating above their nest before they jump out of the nest, which is actually pretty crazy. And how is an eagle able to do that? Because eagles' nest, they're always built close to an area where there's a lot of wind, right? A lot of gust for that to happen. And the other part of an eagle, right? So if an eagle grows to full size in 6 to 12 weeks, that's a very quick maturation process, and the parents have to make it so that the eagle isn't comfortable in the nest, so that it's going to want to leave, right? It's going to want to spread its wings and fly, and that's crazy. And I think about my own life, and coming back from college and coming home and living with my grandpa and my grandma, being 23, and after, it must have been just a couple of months, my grandpa, God bless him, he came to me and he said, "Hey man," he's like, "you've been paying us rent," because that was one of the stipulations of me coming back. He's like, "We've been saving that." He's like, "I'm going to give that back to you." He's like, "You need to go out and get your own place. You got 30 days. I mean, sink or swim, right? And he, in essence, made it uncomfortable for me to want to stay there, so that I had to leave the nest. Interesting correlation there. And finally, the eaglet takes the big plunge and leaves the nest to try to spread their wings and fly. And we have to do that, right? Not just in getting out of the house or getting our kids out of the house, but in a lot of things we have to just take the plunge and jump out there. It's funny, I started this marketing company about a year ago, but I've actually been somewhat obsessed with marketing since I was 15. But to be honest with you, I never really had the cojones to do something on my own. I was always reserved, right, for a multitude of reasons, and it was finally like, hey, like, you're either going to do this and figure it out along the way and overcome this fear that you have, or and enjoy the journey along the way, or you're going to sit back and always wonder, what could have happened. So I just want to encourage you, whatever you're dealing with, maybe you're in a place of comfort, or you're in you find yourself straddled between comfort and being uncomfortable. Jump. It's not difficult for an eagle to ride the wind, right? Given their enormous wingspan and the way that they're made. And just like it's not difficult for them to ride the wind, we're created to trust God. And what that means is we're created to ride on the Holy Spirit, right? Which would represent the wind in this analogy. There you go. The wind represents the Holy Spirit, and we need to learn to build our home close to the wind as an eagle builds its nest close to the wind, because the Holy Spirit is supposed to be our guide if we are believers and we follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. And we were created to know God's presence, and that's incredible, because I think a lot of people get the misconception about Christianity, and I don't even like that term because that can mean so many things to so many different people. But a lot of people are fearful because they believe that they're under the impression that it's all about following these rules, when actually it's nothing like that at all. Obviously, there's rules to a relationship, right, that are just naturally there. And it's obviously a little bit more complex than this, but I can't be in relationship with my wife if I'm always lying to her, or if I'm always treating her bad. But the funny thing about God that people forget and lose sight of is that really it's about relationship. And that's what separates the God of the Bible from every other God and every other religion, is that there's nothing that you can do as a man to prove yourself in God's eyes. He comes down to where you're at because he wants to have a relationship with you. And that's incredible, right? He wants to have a relationship with you and to know you deeply and intimately. So next, however, 40% of eagles do not survive their first flight. That's incredible, right? So 4 out of 10 eagles who jump out of the nest, they got to get saved. And we talked about this last week, so just to recap, if you weren't here last week, it's incredible the mating process of eagles, right? And we talked about how a female eagle is like 1 to 1.5 times bigger than the male. And what they will do is they will start and pick up a twig, and they will fly a little bit up in the air, and then they will drop that twig. And then the male that is courting her will swoop underneath and try to catch that twig. And if he passes that first challenge, he will then proceed to the next level, which means the female will do the same thing over, but she'll grab a bigger stick. And then so on and so forth, up until the 4th time, where literally she's grabbing and clutching a log-sized piece of wood and flying up as high as she possibly can, and then dropping that thing. And then if the male catches that, that's the one that she mates with, and they stay together for life. And why is that important? Why am I reminding you of this? Because she needs to test the man and prove that he is worthy, not just to court her, but for what that means for their family. Because when these eagles, or these eaglets, whatever their names are, when they jump out of the nest, right, to fly, and if only 60% of them make it through their first flight, guess whose job it is to catch the other 40% that don't make it, right, or don't fly right away? It's the male's job. And if he can't catch a stick, he's not catching the eaglets. And that's an important test that he has to go through. Man, that speaks a lot. It's one thing, a little typo. It's one thing to fly and soar in the air, but it's another thing to negotiate the ground. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, right? How when the wind is underneath you, it's easy to soar. But as an eagle gets closer to the ground, right, and there's less wind to ride on, that's when it becomes dangerous for them, right? Because they could easily crash and burn. And it's interesting because many people will come to church, right, which is supposed to be the nest, and they'll float. But when they go back to their workplace or to their school, so many of them crash. There's this saying, bad company corrupts good character, right? And a lot of times it's about who we surround ourselves with, what environment we put ourselves in. We have to be taught how to walk out our faith in the real world, how to negotiate this ground, so to speak. And there's an interesting parable that talks about this. It's the parable of the sower and the seed, and I just want to read this for you a minute because there's a ton of wisdom in here, a ton of wisdom. So check this out. Listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seeds fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. Still, other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times. Then Jesus said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. Man, sometimes the disciples just didn't get it. He told them, "The secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those on the outside everything is said in parables, so that they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding. Otherwise they might turn and be forgiven." Then Jesus said to them, "Don't you understand this parable? How then will you understand any parable? The farmer sows the word. Some people are like seed along the path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that was sown in them." Have you ever been taught, or has someone ever shared something with you, or have you ever been given a word, or someone spoke something about you or spoke something into you, and then immediately the enemy tries to come along and they tell you that's not true, you can't do that? Who are they to tell you that? Who are you to believe that about yourself? Right? It's crazy, right? How that works. Others, like seed sown on rocky places, hear the word and at once receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. Are you going to give up on the word that you've been given? Maybe you were told in life that you were going to do something, and you believed it, and you've been working towards that. But all of a sudden, here comes a little bit of trouble. All of a sudden, here comes a roadblock. Are you going to work to overcome that roadblock? Or are you just going to give up and fall off to the wayside? Still, others, like seeds sown among thorns, hear the word. But the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Others, like seed sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop. Some 30, some 60, some 100 times what was sown. Alright, did you notice out of the 3 negative types of ground, 2 of them talk about the culture that we live in? And that's important because it goes back to my point earlier about bad company corrupts good character, and the environment that you're placing yourself in, and who you're allowing to speak into your life, where you're allowing yourself to go to be influenced. I mean, this is live on Facebook right now, but let's be real, a lot of us, we don't need to spend as much time on Facebook. We don't need to be seeing all the stuff that goes on, all the crazy debates, all the drama, right? That takes a toll on your life. And if you wonder why your emotions might be why they are, why you don't have a high threshold for patience, why you don't have a higher emotional IQ, you might want to think about where the majority of your attention is going towards. And then C, if you want to live as a Christian in this life, you're going to have some battles. And obviously that just doesn't apply to people who want to be Christians. All people are going to face some battles. And no matter what you set your mind out to do, there's going to be some overcoming, because that's the way the world works, right? You can't become better at anything. You can't reach your potential, the purpose that only you were created to do, without some resistance, without some setback, without some disappointment. I don't know why. I really don't. It's kind of like, what comes to my mind is like, you can't know. Okay, I was eating, I guess an example is I was eating a grape earlier, right? They got these grapes now, these like designer grapes. So these grapes my wife bought, they taste like cotton candy, right? I wouldn't know that that grape is sweet and tasty like that if I didn't know the inverse of that, right? If I hadn't ever tasted something that was sour, I'd have nothing to compare it to. There would be no context, right? So just like we can't know what it's like to overcome, we can't know what it's like to experience joy, we can't know what it's like to experience fortitude and determination, or any of the feelings that come with overcoming and accomplishing something without having to go through the battle first. Just doesn't work like that. Ain't my rules. Don't get mad at me. So then D, it's going to be difficult to negotiate the real world. And I guess the last thing that I will leave with you guys for tonight, if you're still watching, is a story. And it's a story about these prisoners of war in Vietnam. And they were, I believe, the longest lasting group of POWs in history. And they were finally rescued after all these times, like months and months and months, maybe even like a year and a couple of months, but whatever the time frame was, it was the longest. And they asked the colonel that was captured with them, why was it that you came here with so many guys, but only so few survived the POW camp? And the colonel said to them, he said, well, you had two groups of people in here. You had realists and you had optimists. And the optimists, they woke up every single day and they're like, today's the day we're going to get rescued. I know it. Today's the day. And they would go along all day believing that. And then when the end of the day would come and they weren't rescued, they'd go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. And then they'd wake up again the next morning and tell themselves the same thing, right? Today is the day we're going to get rescued. And they'd go through that all, over and over again, riding that emotional roller coaster until one day finally it wore them down. But hear me, there's nothing wrong with being optimistic. But then the colonel said there was the realist, right? And this is the difference between the realist and the optimistic. The realist hoped that and believed that they would be rescued. But they went a step further, and they prepared and they chose to live with the idea that they may never get rescued. And there's a choice in there, and that slight distinction, right, to prepare themselves. And it was that mental preparation that gave those few survivors, those few surviving POWs, the ability to outlast all of the rest of them in the horrendous conditions that they were placed in. So we all are going to have difficult things that we're going to face, that we're going to have to negotiate our way through. I don't know why, but I gotta God is prompting me to share this with you. Someone's watching this video and they're in a situation and they're in a relationship and the relationship's tough. And this isn't just a relationship, this is a marriage. And they're not getting what they feel like they should get. And they want to quit. They want to give up. And they're asking themselves, is this worth it? And what you need to know, you need to make a choice. Are you going to be the optimist or are you going to be the realist? And what I mean by that is, what if that relationship, what if you never get what you're hoping that you want, that you want to get? Right? Think back to those vows you made. For better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, through sickness and health. I don't know why, but God is telling me to remind you of that. Yeah. I don't know. Whoever that was for, I mean, I hope that you're getting it, but I just had to say that. So I appreciate you guys being with me tonight and giving me your time. I'm trying to bring you guys, well, I'm not trying to, I'm just being faithful to what God's telling me to share with you guys. So next week we're going to continue to dive further into this, actually for the next couple of weeks, because there's still a lot of things that these eagles can teach us about our lives and how we should live and the way that we should think about approaching these things. So any questions, any feedback, any comments, please feel free to leave them down below. Constructive criticism, I mean, it's all good. Let me know. And if you know somebody that you feel could benefit from this, I would ask that you share my page with them, or share this video with them, or tag them down below and check this out. This may be timely for them. You never know. And this may not that it's about me, but it's not that at all. But this may be something that may be a catalyst in their life to turn the corner, or it may be a timely word that helps them avoid doing something foolish. I don't know. So I would just encourage you to share the love and spread the word. I hope it's apparent by now. I'm not doing this to get famous. I could care less. I'm doing this because I care about people. I care about men. And I see the stuff that the nasty stuff, the dirty stuff, the stuff that holds us back as men, that guys share with me behind the scenes, and it's sad because we're not taught how to deal with those things in school. We're not taught how to face those wounds and overcome those wounds so we can step into our greater purpose, so we can answer that higher calling in our life. And if you don't know what you don't know, and I learned this stuff and it changed my life, so by God, I'm going to share it with other people in hopes that it would change their lives as well. And if you want to play a part in that, I really appreciate it. I really thank you. I can't tell you how many people this has touched. The stuff that I here behind the scenes and the people that reach out to me. Even if it was just one person, it's totally worth it. So sleep tight. We'll see you guys tomorrow for My Life Monday. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Good night.